Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Presley Strother. I am a CCDA staff member. Thank you for joining us today for our Holiday Hospitality Effective Customer Service for Customers with Disabilities. This session is being recorded. The California Commission on Disability Access and the Pacific ADA Center are excited to have you here for the final part of this three-part 2024 webinar collaboration series. The holiday season can be a stressful time for businesses and customers with disabilities. This webinar will share creative ways to provide effective communication, maintenance of accessible features, and overall customer service. We will have ASL interpretation and closed captioning available. Thank you to our interpreters and captioner for being here today. To begin, I will start with housekeeping. Please keep your audio muted during the webinar, and please use the Q&A feature to post questions. We will go over more Q&A in a couple of slides. And then the chat feature can be distracting for people with vision disabilities who use screen reading software, so please just make sure to drop your questions in the Q&A box. For Zoom viewing options, in the upper right-hand corner, select View for speaker or gallery views, and with the screen share, standard or side-by-side options to be able to see the slideshow. During the PowerPoint, view options at top of the screen will be able to adjust the ratio and other features in order for you to see the slideshow presentation better. Also, during the PowerPoint, you can share the screen with the speaker and you can adjust that to your preference. For the Zoom live captions, turn on captions by selecting the CC icon and show the captions on the menu bar. To change the size of the captions, select the arrow next to CC and choose the caption settings. Move the captions by hovering over and dragging them to your preferred location. And to turn off captions, select the CC icon and hide captions. For our Q&A session, to ask a question, select the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. A box shown to the left will pop up. Input your question throughout the webinar. During the Q&A session, that will be at the end of the presentation, and selected questions will be answered along with any registered questions that we received beforehand. And with that, I would like to thank everyone once again for being here, and I am going to pass it over to the Pacific ADA Center Deputy Director of ADA Programs, Jan Garrett, to review the webinar agenda.
Thank you, Presley. So welcome, everyone. And I'm so pleased to be here again with CCDA and April and Presley, and doing the last in our series of 2024 webinars. But certainly we hope to do this again in 2025, and we hope that you'll come again and tell all your friends. But we want you to enjoy today too. And so we'll be introducing ourselves, and I will turn it over to April to introduce herself now.
Thanks, Jan. Hi, everyone. This is April Dawson Rawlings, the Executive Director of the California Commission on Disability Access. And like Jan, I want to welcome all of you to this webinar, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some fun tips that retail businesses and restaurants and others can use during the holiday season to ensure equal access to customers with disabilities.
Great, thank you. And then, as Presley said, I'm the Deputy Director of ADA Programs for the Pacific ADA Center, and we'll have more information on how to contact us at the end of the presentation as well. And so one of the things we're going to be talking about today is reasonable modifications that businesses can make during the holiday season to make sure that there is access for people with all types of disabilities. So thinking about holiday considerations for accessibility and maintaining the accessible features that you already have. And next slide. So we'll also be talking about effective communication for businesses and understanding communication disabilities to make sure that we're getting different disabilities involved in this conversation. And then considerations for business owners and operators, which we can give you some accessible options for customers that have disabilities during the holiday season. And we'll then at the end have a question and answer session and also talk about available resources. And with that, I think I turn it over to April.
Thanks, Jan. Well, I want to talk a little bit about what the California Commission on Disability Access is all about and what we offer to our business stakeholders. We offer small business education and outreach. We also create technical materials and trainings related to ADA compliance, as well as California Accessibility Building Code compliance. We conduct regional and statewide listening forums and webinars, such as this one. And we also are mandated by the state legislature to track disability access litigation related to construction-related alleged disability access violations and website accessibility access violations. And we publish that data every year in our annual report to the state legislature. So if you are a business, a person with a disability, or a member of a government entity, we are here to help you understand how to demystify access and to ensure that access to people with disabilities to places of public accommodation, in other words, businesses, can happen. We also are a 17-member public commission, so we're subject to Bagley-Keene, and we have several meetings throughout the year, both our full commission meetings and our stakeholder subcommittee meetings, and those are all great ways to engage with what we're doing. And I'll share a little bit more, as Jan said at the end of the webinar, about other ways to engage with us and learn about our meetings, but we would love to have public engagement at our meetings. Thank you. Jan?
Thank you, April. This is Jan speaking. So what the Pacific ADA Center offers is technical assistance that we offer through email and phone. And on the phone, you will actually get a live person almost all the time. There are occasional times when you may have to leave a message, but we always get back to people almost always the same day, unless you call very late in the day. So we are very, very, it's very important to us to get back to everyone quickly. We also tend to answer our emails very quickly as well, within 48 hours. And people certainly can contact us either way. Also to know, our technical assistance is free, and it is actually confidential as well. We don't report anyone to any enforcement agency that enforces the ADA or any other disability rights laws. So businesses, state and local governments, please feel free to call us, because we're not going to report you to anyone else. And we give the same information to people with disabilities that we give to people who have responsibilities under the law. So businesses, nonprofits, state and local governments. So I really feel like it's important that you know that you can contact us for any of those reasons, and that it is free and confidential. We also provide trainings. We're obviously doing one now. We do a lot of online trainings and have since the pandemic, but we also do some trainings in person. So if you want trainings, please let us know that, and we might be able to work with you on either a virtual or an in-person training. We also do webinars every few months, and we do have one coming up on September 24th, a lunch and learn, something kind of similar to this, but it's on employment and the ADA, and those webinars are free. We also offer a healthcare and the ADA webinar every other month, and that is also free. We also offer materials, and that is typically done through emails and links through emails, but also through our website. There's lots of links to materials and information on our website, and we'll be giving you that link at the end of the presentation, but we really encourage you to explore our website and ask us for any additional information you might want, because our website is also in plain language, and we have tried to make it as accessible as possible. If you find that there's any accessibility issues, please let us know that. The other thing that we do every year is we offer a virtual conference and an in-person conference. Our in-person conference is coming up on October 9th and 10th in Sacramento. A lot of you I know are in the area. Please go to our website. Again, we will have that information at the end, but it's basically adapacific.org, and sign up for our conference on October 9th and 10th at the Sacramento Convention Center. And April will be presenting, and I will be co-presenting on a couple of sessions as well. So we hope to see you there. And I'll turn it back to April.
Thanks, Jan. So let's talk about, what is disability? And it's important to know that disabilities are very varied, and that there's no, one specific type of disability. That I like to say that people with disabilities are like a kaleidoscope of people, and that people have many types of disabilities. And it's important to note that not all disabilities are physical. I am a wheelchair user, so my disability kind of discloses for me, but I also have a learning disability that you can't see. And, as to that point, some disabilities are obvious and some are not. And it's important to know that people with disabilities are your customers. According to a recent Forbes article, if you included all the people with disabilities worldwide, which the National Institute of Health and others, including the Department of Labor, estimate that 1 in 4 adults have some type of disability in the United States. But if you combine all the people in the world, including their family members who might go with them shopping, people with disabilities have over $13 trillion of annual disposable income. So I think it's really important that we see people with disabilities as people who have money to spend and who want to come to your business just like everyone else and procure what you have to offer. So think of people with disabilities as your customers.
Absolutely. So people with disabilities not only may have non-apparent disabilities, they may have multiple disabilities, and they come with all races and ethnicities, all gender identities, all ages, all national origins. They speak multiple languages. Disability is the only minority you can join. So people with disabilities have multiple identities, just like we all do. And so it's important to understand that, and important to understand that people can have also more than one disability. I myself use a wheelchair like April does, and my disability is very obvious if you see me. But also, I have had cancer in the past, and that is a disability that you don't see. And so you can't always tell whether or not somebody has a disability that you may want to accommodate and make sure that they have a great customer experience during the holidays and all year round when they come to see you. April?
Thanks, Jan. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the Americans with Disabilities Act. Just that we're going to give an overview of the different titles, and we're going to be focusing on Title III today, which has to do with public accommodations. But Title I has to do with employment and the rights of people with disabilities related to employment. Title II, it has to do with public entities, which are state and local governments, as well as public transportation entities. It's important to note that the federal government is covered under Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. And so that's why some people ask me, well, what about the federal government? And the 504 regulations are very similar to the Title II regulations for state and local governments. So make sure if you're affiliated with a federal government agency that you look up the 504 regs and give us a call if you have questions. Title III is public accommodations. That's another, just a fancy way of saying private businesses that are open to the public. That also can include social service organizations, so nonprofits, as well as businesses like that. So some people don't think of nonprofits as businesses because it says not for profit, but nonprofits are also a business. So just think about that. Title IV has to do with telecommunications, and Title V are miscellaneous protections. Jan?
Yes, thanks, April. And I realized I have not been describing the photos on each slide. So we can go to slide 13. That's okay. I can describe from here on out. But this is kind of a shopping mall that it's showing. So talking about what ADA Title III covers, and people at the holiday time, but all year round, go shopping. They also go to restaurants, and often, malls have restaurants in them as well. So, and they may even have social service agencies that are located within these, multi shop malls. And so ADA Title III covers the places of public accommodation, as April said, open to the public, and it includes all types of private businesses. So that can be a restaurant, it can be a shop, It can be a gym. It can be a private museum. It can be a private college, place of education. It can be all kinds of different private entities that are open to the public. So that is really important to understand, as well as the social service organizations like Centers for Independent Living, like the Pacific ADA Center, which is a social service organization. We're a nonprofit. So all of us are included in that Title III open to the public kind of area. And then I mentioned already retail stores, which are open to the public, and restaurants. Next slide.
Thanks, Jan. And this is April. I do see in the chat, Presley, that James, one of the ASL interpreters, needs to be re-spotlighted. So I just wanted to call that out just for accessibility. I see that Beth is still interpreting right now. So let's talk about the ADA's impact on businesses. And I just want to say that this webinar is at a really high level, and we have other presentations. In fact, if you would like to drill down a little bit more on some of the the ADAS and some of the other the regulations, come to the Pacific ADA's conference. So we're going to be talking about a very high level. And if you have specific questions, that's what we can talk about it in the Q&A. And if we're not able to get to your question today, you could send us an email and we can drill down a little bit more. So we're not going to go into too much detail about like the specific regulations, like for example, how many inches off of a wall that a grab bar has to be, for example, but we can show you how to find that information. And we have other presentations that go a little bit deeper between our two organizations. So the ADA really talks about increased accessibility to retail stores, restaurants, and other places of public accommodations, as Jan just mentioned. And the ADA has different requirements depending on if you're a new facility or if you're modifying an existing structure. There is a really big misconception out there that if you're in a building that existed before the passage of the ADA, that you're somehow grandfathered. I always want to say that the only grandfather that matters is a picture of my grandfather. And I'm not doing it today, but sometimes in my presentations, I'll just show a picture of my grandfather and be like, think about this grandfather, but don't think about that grandfather because it'll mislead you. So it's really important that you work with a certified access specialist or call the Pacific ADA Center and get specific advice on how the ADA applies to your specific business and structure. But please, please, please know that every business has some type of obligation under the ADA, regardless of when you started your business or how old your building is, to be accessible to people with disabilities. And so there's a couple of things that the ADA requires of businesses, such as reasonable modifications to your policies and procedures and way of doing business, as long as it doesn't fundamentally alter the way you're doing business. Effective communication and maintaining your accessible features. And so in the subsequent slides, we're going to be talking about those three concepts. And you'll probably, for those of you who have attended our other webinars in the past, you'll see that we purposely chose those three concepts throughout each of our webinars so that we can reinforce them at each one. So because these are the ones that we'd really like you to focus on among others. And part of the reason we also decided to have a holiday theme to today's webinar is you're probably thinking, this is sort of the time of year when retail stores and restaurants and others start thinking about, how they're going to shift their business models for the holiday season. And you may be changing your storefronts and doing some things that look different than other times of the year. So this also might be a time when you're starting to hire your holiday staff. And it's really important, as it is throughout the year, to provide staff training on ADA compliance and disability awareness. And our two organizations can help you with some tips on how to do that. Jan?
Yeah. Next slide. So, and this slide is showing a picture of a young woman who is wearing a red party dress, who looks really happy and excited. Maybe she's getting ready to go to a party. She looks like she's in a clothing store. You can see other clothes next to her. She uses a wheelchair. And So one of the things that you may want to do in terms of reasonable modifications to your policies, practices, or procedures during the holidays is that you may want to just ensure generally that people with disabilities have equal access and an equal opportunity to enjoy your restaurant or your retail store or whatever it is that you have. So you do need to make those reasonable modifications unless it's fundamentally alters your business and completely changes is basically what that means. If it completely changes how you do business, you don't have to do that. Like somebody can't say, I want you to open at midnight so that I don't have to actually, encounter any other people in your store. Well, that would be a fundamental alteration of how you do business, and you would not be required to do that. But an example of something that you could do, like if you were a doctor's office, for example, which typically are private businesses open to the public and are considered public accommodations, is that you could give somebody an early appointment if that would be easier for them, or a later appointment. So there's ways that you can do things as a public accommodation and modify how you typically do your policies and procedures. But the goal is really to improve accessibility while maintaining how you do business. And, an example of that is also if you're in a restaurant, moving your tables and chairs so that you have a clear path, at least a 36-inch wide path from the door to where somebody would sit at a table and enjoy a meal, all the way back to the bar where somebody may want to sit at the bar and enjoy a drink, and then all the way back to the restroom. And also an accessible route all the way to the patio if you have patio seating outside, and making that accessible. So moving tables and chairs is an example of how you can modify how you typically do things in order to provide a greater level of access. And there are many other examples of that as well that I think we'll be talking about. April?
Thanks, Jan. And I'll describe, there is a photo of a shopping cart, and it is in the middle of a brightly lit aisle. And there's several blue and white and red and gold ribbons on a bunch of gifts inside the metal shopping cart. So Jan touched on a few of these, but let's talk about a couple of things that we need to keep in mind about considerations for accessibility. It's really important that your seasonal signage is easy to read and are located, within the eye level of people who may use wheelchairs or are of short stature, and also that they're in large enough font for people to read if they have a vision impairment. You also want to make sure that your aisles are wide enough to accommodate wheelchairs and mobility aids, which Jan just touched on, and removing clutter. So this goes back to the importance of maintaining your accessible features. And when I talk about accessible features, those are the parts of your business that people with disabilities need to access in order to, fully appreciate everything that your business has to offer. Like, for example, if you're a gift shop that sells shells, don't have a bunch of clutter in the walkway leading to the shelves and have it on a super high shelf. Or if you do have it on a high shelf, make sure you have a reasonable modification to allow people to get that down for the person. It would be best practice, though, if you could make sure that people could independently reach them, for example. I do see this a lot during, the busy seasons of the year. Particularly, there's one store in particular in my neighborhood that I go to, and sometimes whenever they have like new promotions and things like that, they're well intentioned. They want to make sure that you see, hey, wine is 50% off, for example, but they'll put the wine like right in the middle of the aisle and it is usually the aisle that I need to get to, and so it's really hard to maneuver my chair around that. So just remember, try to think strategically for access when you're thinking about how to put out your new holiday merchandise and your promotions. You want to make sure that your decor is not blocking pathways, exits, or, as I mentioned, accessible features. Also think about the restrooms too. I remember growing up, there was a restaurant that used to put a scarecrow on the toilet as a joke. But and I'm laughing, but it's not that funny if you are a person with a disability who can't physically move that. So we're not saying that you shouldn't have fun decor, and because people with disabilities want to enjoy that fun decor just as much as anybody else. But when you're thinking about the main places in your store where people with disabilities need to access, just think strategically about where to place things like as I gave an example, a scarecrow or a holiday gnome or something, and make sure that you're not blocking like the toilet paper dispenser or just the way to get into the bathroom or the sink or things like that. Jan?
Well, and I would just add too to some of the things you were talking about. Also, make sure that you don't have your signs sticking out or other merchandise sticking out to where it becomes a protruding object for somebody who's blind. If it's between 27 inches and 80 inches off the ground, it shouldn't be sticking out from a shelf or the wall more than 4 inches, because if it does, somebody who's blind won't detect that with their cane as they're sweeping their cane back and forth as they move through your store. And they could actually run right into it, and they could be poked in the face with a sign or merchandise or other things like that, which is not pleasant, and they won't enjoy their shopping experience as a customer. So you want to make sure also that you're not just thinking about wheelchair access, which is certainly important, but that you're thinking about people with other disabilities as well. And so we'll go to the this slide, and that you one of the things you can do to maintain your accessible features, and this is kind of showing a car parked in the snow, and it has kind of a little accessibility symbol right below the parking sign. I don't think that sign would be in California because it's not a legal sign for California for parking, but there's a lot of snow on the ground around this car, and certainly California, some parts of California do have snow, but making sure that you're maintaining, if you have snow or ice or something else in your parking space, that you're maintaining that parking space, you're maintaining that access aisle next to it. If you need to be able to get out and get in to your car, that is super important. So and that you regularly inspect your accessible features to make sure that they remain operational during the busy holiday season, like for ramps and elevators and doors. Keep accessible parking spaces, entrances, and paths free of your snow, ice, and holiday decorations. So make sure that you don't have like a bunch of holiday gifts and other things, and maybe even holiday plants in the access aisle that's blocking the access aisle and therefore blocking access. And also, like April talked about earlier, keep the restrooms accessible, the door into the restroom accessible, the whole accessible route all the way back to the accessible stall, the sinks, all of those things, need to be accessible. And again, making sure that there's no protruding objects sticking out like the paper towel dispenser that somebody blind might run into in the restroom. Next slide, and April.
Thanks, Jan. I also want to add to the previous slide that if you have questions about accessible parking, I want to do a plug for our accessible parking campaign. CCDA created an accessible parking toolkit that is available on our website. The English version, both the printed version and the PDF, is out now, and we will have other California threshold languages available in the coming weeks as well. And we can move on to the next slide. And this is a picture of a Black woman with red braids and a red and white hat, talking to an older man with glasses and a striped shirt in front of some, it looks like some holiday decorations at a store. So let's talk a little bit about how other ways that you can plan for access during the holidays. And a lot of these tips you should be doing all year round. But as I said, this is also a time when a lot of staffing changes happen. You're bringing on, extra people. And so it's really important that you incorporate ADA access into your staff training, and not just the physical access piece, but also talking about, I don't really like the word etiquette because I just think you should treat everybody with respect. I prefer the word like I prefer disability justice, but that's me. But if that doesn't jive with you, you could say etiquette, or you could just think about just teaching your employees how to treat people with disabilities, how you would want to treat any customer. So, and make sure that there is a point person, not just during the busy holiday season, but every year, who would create checklists and duty sheets and be sort of the person that makes sure that your accessible features are maintained, and that your policies and procedures are being followed, and who also might be able to answer questions that staff might have. Just make sure that your chain of command includes that. So like when you have your managers meeting, like if you're a store manager, for example, think about the fact that access starts at the top and you model that as a leader, and that you want to also empower your associates with, like if you're a retail store, for example, or if you're a restaurant, empower your wait staff that access is something that everyone can do. And you want to also empower people that they have a role to play in the way that they conduct their customer service, and that they're a reflection of your business, just as you would with any other staff training. You also, it's really important. One of the most popular reasonable modifications is a reasonable modification to your no pet policy. So you may be a restaurant that doesn't normally allow animals, but of course by law you have to allow service animals. So make sure you post a service animals allowed notification in your business. That makes people realize that you're friendly to their dog, so that they'll want to come and eat at your restaurant or shop at your gift shop or buy coffee from you, for example. We also have on this slide evaluating facilities for future uses, and that's a term that can be used not just for this particular part of the year, but all, thinking about, as you, particularly the management who may be on this call, thinking about what your, for example, you might be, a factory making, you may be a candy store making candy, but you want to, run the world and be like, it's like, we're going to not just make candy, but we're going to do lots of other things in the future in our strategic business plan. So when you're thinking about the future uses for your facility, make sure that you're getting advice from a certified access specialist, for example, about how to make sure that how those future uses come into play with the law. So, Jan?
Okay. So another thing that is really important as part of your customer service and serving customers with all types of disabilities is to train staff to effectively communicate with customers who have communication related disabilities. And that's customers that have hearing, vision, and or speech disabilities. So making sure, do you know, how do you might want to pass texting or notes back and forth for somebody who's deaf if it's a very brief conversation and you didn't know that they were coming into your store or restaurant. With somebody with a vision disability, they may ask you to read the menu to them in your restaurant, or to read prices to them in your store, in your gift shop. So providing that as a way of effective communication. And for people with speech disabilities, making sure that you're patient with them, and as they may speak, that you ask them to repeat their words if you're not understanding them. Don't just say uh-huh and act like you're understanding. Make sure that you're actually understanding, and have them spell words if you need them to, so that you're sure that you're actually doing effective communication with folks. And so there's lots of different opportunities for that. And if you're an office party, for example, having like a holiday party, make sure that you schedule sign language interpreters if you have deaf employees, because you know that that's coming up. You know that they want to interact socially with their peers and their colleagues. So if you know that something is coming up, a type of event, make sure that you schedule those sign language interpreters. Make sure that anything that is written, any kind of written invitation, is in an alternative format for people with vision disabilities, and make sure you're being able to speak to people with speech disabilities as well, and who also may be using a speech device or a speech board. as well. April, next slide.
Thank you. And I just want to call out something in the chat about, and I'll just say, Beck talked about, and this relates to my slide, that just writing something down isn't necessarily equal access, and that some businesses may think that that might be a sufficient, workaround. And so I want to talk a little bit about understanding communication disabilities related to hearing. And so, to Beck's point, when we talk about effective communication, there may be some cases where passing notes might be appropriate, but like if you're a car dealership, for example, like during the holidays, I know that I think it's like the, Lexus or Mercedes, they always have these like, oh my gosh, my wife bought me a car, and if there's a giant bow, and it's like, oh, I'm independently wealthy and I have a new car now. But those commercials. But what's interesting about that is, like, if you're a person who's deaf and you're trying to buy that surprise, really expensive car for your wife to show her on whatever holiday, you passing notes back and forth isn't going to cut that, because that's a complex transaction. So when you're thinking about, you have to think about making sure that you make accommodations for all different types of transactions, not just simple ones. It's really important also, this is where you could consult with your local Center for Independent Living, where Beck works. So Beck, I'm doing a little shout out here to ILCs, since you volunteered yourself, is that your local Center for Independent Living can help you know which vendors that you could potentially use for ASL in your local area, or Braille menus, for example, or large print. Making sure that you have a lot of that planned out for that holiday party, or not just the holiday party, but just alternate formats for your menus and other materials as well, for that communication. So getting back to hearing, making sure you have sign language interpreters available for those events, or if somebody requests a reasonable modification for if you have a class, for example, and a person is deaf and so they request an ASL interpreter. Also video remote interpreting. There are a lot of apps now where you can talk to and have an ASL interpreter come up on your phone and talk to a person. Real-time captioning and the relay service. Make sure you train your staff on what a relay service is, because you don't want to have a situation where a deaf person calls, for example, and inquires about your business, and the relay person is who's talking, and so you think it's a prank call or something like that. So train your staff about the relay service. Jan?
Yeah, and I'll just add that for real-time captioning, some people who don't know American Sign Language, who became deaf later in life, they may need the captioning as opposed to sign language. And so make sure that you know how people communicate before you schedule any kind of effective communication.
And on this, let's go back to this next slide, the prior slide. There's a picture of an Asian gentleman in a blue shirt, and he is doing sign language into it looks like he's talking to someone that is not readily apparent, but it kind of speaks for itself, that they're doing sign language into a computer, and he's sitting at a desk.
Okay. And then this slide has a young woman wearing like a red sweater and a striped shirt underneath. And there's all these kind of lights all around on the picture. And she looks like she's in a shopping mall and she's looking down at her phone. So also understanding communication disabilities for people with vision disabilities as well. There are a lot of apps out there that can read documents for people with vision disabilities, but you still may want to offer other options for folks. You can offer alternative format printed materials. They can be in an electronic format. They can be large print, and people need kind of different sizes of font depending on their vision. They also may use Braille. And so for shorter documents, you may want something in Braille, or a document that's not going to change very often. You may want to have that in Braille. And again, your Center for Independent Living may help you figure out how to get that done, and may help you figure out how to get even the interpreters and the captioners. Also making your websites accessible to screen readers. Title II entities, state and local governments, if you're on here, you have until April of 2026 to make your websites and mobile apps accessible, the Department of Justice has said. And the Department of Justice has also said that private businesses and private social service agencies also, as part of their obligation for effective communication, have to make their websites and mobile apps as accessible as possible. And generally that means complying with the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG 2.1 AA is what the standard typically is. And we can at the Pacific ADA Center, and I know CCDA can also help you get to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines if you need us to be able to help you understand what those require for your websites and mobile apps. And then you can also have qualified readers. If it's somebody reading a menu, it may not need to have a really high level of qualification. But if it's somebody who's reading that car contract, like April talked about, you need to have somebody who's really qualified to read all those that terminology in that contract and make sure they know what it means when they're reading it to you. Okay, April, next slide.
Thanks, Jan. And to the left, there is a picture of a pad and paper sitting on a table that has various decor on it, some winter decor, some pine cones, and some gift packages that are red and kind of off-white ivory colored. So let's talk a little bit about speech disabilities. So for simple, brief conversations, it might be appropriate to write notes. I think we've kind of extensively talked about that it depends on the complexity of the interaction, and that you don't want to just default to that at each transaction for your business. And Jan touched on this a couple slides ago, but just remembering that you want to allow time for the customer to express themselves. So some people who may have speech disabilities, such as a stutter, or maybe there's someone who recently had a stroke, or they have a traumatic brain injury, for example, they know exactly what they want to say. It just takes a second for them to get the words out. And like, let's say I'm just like, and then you go, oh, you want the ribbon? You're taking away that person's ability to express for themselves what they want. So every customer, we all get drilled into us, the customer is always right. And you just want to, imagine how you would feel if you knew exactly what you wanted to say and it just took a second, and then somebody just kind of took the words out of your mouth. And that doesn't make a customer feel empowered during that sale or that interaction with you to learn more about your product. So allow time for the customer to get their words out, avoid guessing, don't talk over them. Also, if they come to your store with an interpreter or with a caregiver, still make eye contact with that person, even if someone else is speaking for them. So, just maintain eye contact and show that you're engaged, and treat people with respect. And then ask questions that can be answered with a nod. Sometimes you can ask questions that if a person is nonverbal, they can answer with a nod or the shake of a head also. So just try to adapt your style to your customer, just as you would with any customer. Jan?
Yeah, and this slide is showing a young person using a wheelchair with their family. They're all decked in winter gear. They look like they're outside looking inside of a store window, and there's about 4 of them that are standing there, and they're all white people. And so make sure that you're using respectful and inclusive language as well. Using people first language, like an individual who is blind or a person who uses a wheelchair. Some people don't like that language. Some people prefer, wheelchair user or disabled person. But typically what you want to do is use the person first as your first option, unless you know that they don't prefer that language. Also, a person is not their disability. Don't say that someone is retarded or a quadriplegic or an epileptic. Always put the emphasis on the person's ability rather than their limitations. And, you know, if you know their name, try to learn their name. First of all, you should probably try to do that with every customer. It's like, so I'm Sandra. What's your name? And we're, you know, welcome to our store or welcome to our restaurant. We're happy you're here. And try to learn their name so you don't have to refer to them as that wheelchair user over there. Okay. So try to personalize your interaction more. And also remember that disability is not a tragedy, or people are not suffering because they have disabilities. They have their disability. It's part of their identity, as we explained earlier. And you just have to make sure that you are providing the equal opportunity that they deserve to be able to participate in your store or your restaurant. April?
Thanks, Jan. So let's talk a little bit more about considerations for business owners and operators of businesses. We talked a lot about this, but making sure that you put accessibility first. Remember that if you're a manager or an owner, that access starts with you, and you model that all the way down to your associates, and that you need to empower your staff to know that they also play a role in ensuring access. Because you want to empower your team leads, as well as your team leads empowering the day-to-day staff, your customer service staff, and your floor staff, or your waiters, for example, because you don't want to create a situation where people feel like they always have to go to the manager and feel disempowered in their job, when actually they do have the tools that you taught them in that staff training. You know, get familiar with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We'll talk a little bit about in business resources that we'll talk about in a little bit. We'll be talking about how you can contact a certified access specialist in your area. And those are people who are trained on disability access laws specific to California and are certified by the Division of the State Architect to help businesses learn what they need to do to improve access. And you want to make sure that you're conducting periodic evaluations of your business to identify any accessibility barriers. Also, some things that we didn't cover in prior slides is thinking about people who's, you know, we talked a lot about people with invisible disabilities, but it's also important to talk about people, some of those invisible disabilities might include, you know, scented product allergies or scented product sensitivities. And so when you think about during the holidays experimenting with different scents to attract people to come to your store, try to think about, you know, placing those scents in a place where it's not going to be so overpowering as somebody walks in, or kind of tone it down a little bit. Again, we're not telling you you can't have fun. We're just giving you ideas for that person could be your next sale, or that next person that's going to be a generational customer for you. So thinking about those customers and their comfort. Also, if you're a store that's going to employ some intermittent flashing lights or strobe lights, keep in mind that people who have epilepsy or other seizure-related disabilities, that could trigger a seizure. So it's a really good idea to put a warning as people walk in, like you know, flashing lights may happen, and to give people the option. Also, try your best, like if you have holiday lights, for example, to keep them, you know, at a consistent brightness, not the flashing if you can. But if some of your decor, you know, involves, you know, like for example, some of the holidays coming up might have like scary stuff or that kind of thing, maybe put the flashing lights and scary fun stuff in the back and let people know where to find it, so that people who may be triggered by that, you know, can choose to go to other parts of your store. Next slide, please. Oh,
Yeah.
actually, sorry, let me describe this. This is a picture, I think it's of Times Square in New York, of a lot of tall buildings and merchandise and people walking across the street hurriedly to shop at your restaurant or your store.
And just what to tag on to what April was saying, maybe place your scented product areas in just certain parts of the store and not throughout the store, so that you can say, if somebody says, you know, I have a sensitivity to scents, is there a part of the store I should avoid? So making sure that you're doing that as well, and also using unscented products to clean your store, your restaurant, your restrooms, that kind of thing. Next slide. So you can provide alternative options for shopping. You want to make sure your online shopping is accessible. You want to offer curbside pickup if people can't get into your store or maybe make it through your store. You want to offer maybe some quiet shopping hours for customers with sensory disabilities that would really help them. An hour a few times a week, at least once during the week and once on a weekend, would really help a lot of people that have that are on the autism spectrum or have other sensory disabilities. Also include accessible payment systems. Make sure that there's some contactless payment methods for people who have sensitivities and who are susceptible to getting more germs and want to watch themselves for that. And that also makes sure that your card readers are at an accessible height as well.
All right, and so now we've come to the part of the presentation where we're going to talk about, we want to make sure we hold space for some Q&A, and Presley's going to help us with that, and Jan and I can kind of tag team off of each other. I know that we have about 9 minutes left, so I just want to say that I think that what we'll do is after we do the Q&A, we'll just talk about how to stay in touch with our two agencies. We do have business resources on this slide. On this presentation that talks about where to find a certified access specialist and some of the other things that we've discussed. And so rather than go through each one, we will, yes, be sending, we will be posting a copy of the recording to our YouTube channel, and we will be sending out the materials and the slides to registered participants so that everybody can access these business resources. So Presley, could you help us with the Q&A, please?
Yes, thank you, April. I want to start with the first question. What resources are available for people who are visually impaired shopping by themselves?
Should I answer that, April? Or?
Why don't you start and I'll tag team with you.
Yeah, great. Well, we talked earlier about reasonable modification of policy. And so this is a good question to prompt that, which is that you want to have, if you possibly can, if you have enough staff on the floor, which hopefully you do, when people are really heavily shopping or using your restaurant a lot, is make sure with shopping with somebody with a vision disability that you can say, well, how can I help you? Are you looking for something specific? Can I take you to a certain section of the store? Can I tell you about, the shirts or the dresses or the pants? I can say, are you looking for brown shoes or black shoes or something like that? So make sure that you're asking the questions and that you're getting really what your customer wants, and making sure that if they need a sighted guide, that you can say, well, should I offer you my elbow, or would you like to put your hand on my shoulder while we move through the store? If they need that, they may not need it, but offer it as an option, and just make sure that, yeah, you're asking them what they want and that you're describing things to them as they shop.
Yeah, and this is April, and I'll just add that goes back to to thinking about your staffing, knowing that there's going to be an increase in people coming to your business during the holidays. Think about the extra staff you might need on the floor, and making sure that they know during your morning huddle or whatever, like, okay, Dave, you're the person that's going to kind of look out to make sure that if someone needs a sighted guide or questions, make sure that your greeters are trained to work with all customers, including those with disabilities, and are trained to know what to do when somebody asks for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I believe we have time for one more quick question. A small downtown business operating in a crowded area wants to ensure accessible parking and entry points for customers with disabilities during the holiday rush. What action should the business take to ensure compliance with ADA requirements?
April, you want to start out on that one?
Could you repeat the question, Presley? I was reading the Q&A and I got distracted.
Yeah, no problem. So a small downtown business operating in a crowded area wants to ensure accessible parking and entry points for customers with disabilities during the holiday rush. What action should the business take to ensure compliance with the ADA?
Well, first, I would say make sure you check out CCDA's accessible parking guide, because we also talk about exterior paths of travel. You really want to think about the experience of the person from when they, let's just not everyone with a disability drives, but quite a few do, just like everybody else. From when the moment they park their car to how they're going to get out, how they're going to access all the points to get in and out of your store, or whatever whatever business you have. And so you just want to think about making sure that your access aisle ramps are free of like shopping carts, for example, or holiday decor. I know a lot of harvest theme, hint, hint, holiday decor might be happening soon in the next month. And so make sure that those vegetable items are not just, where the accessible parking ramp is supposed to be, or making sure that people can actually get into the front door without having to go around a lot of decor. And so we're not saying don't have decor. We're not saying don't have fun. We're just saying you need to have an accessible path of travel. Think about your accessible paths of travel and your exterior routes and your accessible parking during the busy holiday season. Do you have anything to add, Jan?
No, I think that was perfect. Yeah, just make sure everything around your doors is clear, and everything around your parking is clear, and everything as much as you can throughout the store, that you have, accessible paths and no protruding objects throughout your store.
Awesome. Thank you so much for those answers. I will pass it over to, let's see, Jan, to give us some information about the Pacific ADA Center.
Yeah, so this is how you can contact us. Our address, our phone number, 1-800-949-4232. And that's voice and the relay service. Also, our email is info at adapacific.org. And our website is at adapacific.org as well. And then on the slide is also the link that you can sign up for our newsletters and receive our mailings, adapacific.org/subscribe. And you can learn more about our conference that we've been promoting. You can learn more about, fact sheets that we put out, webinars we have coming up. And we have a monthly newsletter that is often really, really helpful. So I encourage you to subscribe to our listserv as well. And April?
Thanks, Jan. So let's talk about how we can stay connected with my organization, the California Commission on Disability Access. I mentioned before that you can attend any of our meetings. All of our meetings are open to the public, and we welcome and very much want your participation. You can go to our website, which is www.dgs.ca.gov/CCDA, and you can go to our meetings tab and learn about our upcoming meetings. You can also go to our business resources tab and find all of the business resources that are listed in this webinar, which you will receive a copy of. We also have a Facebook and YouTube channel, so please like and subscribe us. All of our recordings of everything that we do, from our webinars to our listening forums to our public meetings, are all nested on our YouTube channel recording section. You can also write to us if you don't have access to a computer at 400 R Street, Suite 310, Sacramento 95811. We also, if you go to our website, you also can read all about the commission and our history. You can also subscribe to our mailing list. So a big way that we get people to come to these events is through our mailing list. We also have a newsletter as well. And you can also email us at ccda@dgs.ca.gov or call us at 916-319-9974. And if you have an access-related question, that you email us, we will make sure that we get you to the correct person to answer that question. CCDA is not involved in enforcement, and we don't do mediation, but we do But what we do is give businesses resources and point you to the right person to give you that in-depth advice about what to do to be accessible. Thank you all for being here today. I'm really excited. Thank you, Jan, for being such a great partner and the Pacific ADA Center. This is our final webinar of 2024, but we'll be back strong in 2025 with more of these webinars with some new voices as well. So thank you all for being here today. And we hope you learned something useful. I hope you will think of one access related thing that you will take back to your business and implement within the next week. Thank you.
So thank you, April. Thank you, CCDA and Presley and everyone. And thank you all for coming today.
Thank you.